On the afternoon of November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, a man in a dark suit and a thin black tie walked up to the counter at Portland International Airport. He paid cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, giving his name as Dan Cooper. He looked utterly ordinary, middle-aged, calm, wearing a white shirt and carrying a black attaché case. No one gave him a second glance. Within hours, that forgettable man would become the most wanted ghost in American history. The flight was short, barely 30 minutes in the air. Cooper took seat 18C near the back of the Boeing 727 and ordered a bourbon and soda. Shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. She assumed it was a lonely businessman slipping her his phone number, and dropped it into her purse unread. Cooper leaned toward her and said quietly, "You'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." When she opened the paper, she saw neat, capitalized letters describing a bomb in his case. Cooper cracked the briefcase open just enough for her to glimpse it, a tangle of red cylinders, wires, and a battery. His demands were precise and businesslike. He wanted $200,000 in $20 bills. He wanted 4 parachutes. And he wanted a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane the moment it landed. This was not a man improvising. He knew exactly what he was doing. The message was relayed to the ground. As the plane circled Seattle for 2 hours, the FBI scrambled to assemble the ransom. They gathered exactly 10,000 $20 bills, a bundle of cash weighing about 21 pounds, and photographed the serial number of every single note. That decision would haunt the case for decades. Meanwhile, Cooper sat calmly, chain-smoking, sipping his drink, and even paying his bar tab. Witnesses later described him as polite, composed, and eerily unbothered. When Flight 305 finally landed in Seattle, the exchange went smoothly. Cooper released all 36 passengers and 2 of the flight attendants in return for the money and the parachutes. But the ordeal was far from over. He kept the pilots and a few crew members aboard and issued a new set of instructions. He wanted the plane to fly to Mexico City slowly, at low altitude, with the landing gear down, the flaps set, and the cabin unpressurized. The rear stairway was to remain unlocked. These were strange, technical requests, and they revealed something important. The Boeing 727 had a rare feature, a set of stairs that lowered from the tail of the aircraft, which could be opened in flight. Cooper seemed to know that this particular plane could be jumped from safely, mid-air, without being sucked into the engines. To some investigators, that suggested he had aviation experience, perhaps even military parachute training. He was engineering his own escape. The plane took off again into a cold, stormy night, heading south toward Reno. Somewhere over the dark, forested wilderness of southwest Washington, in freezing rain and near-zero visibility, Cooper lowered the rear stairs. Around 8 o'clock, the crew felt a sudden change in air pressure, a slight bump that rippled through the fuselage. They called back to him over the intercom. There was no answer. Dan Cooper was gone, swallowed by the night, the storm, and 20,000 feet of empty air. When the plane landed in Reno with its stairway still hanging open, Cooper had vanished. He left behind only his black tie, its clip, 2 of the 4 parachutes, and a handful of cigarette butts. The FBI launched one of the longest and most exhaustive manhunts in its history, a case they codenamed Norjack. They combed the rugged terrain below the flight path with search teams, tracking dogs, and helicopters. They found nothing, no body, no parachute, no money. The forest simply kept its secret. For years, the trail stayed completely cold. Then, in 1980, an 8-year-old boy digging along the banks of the Columbia River uncovered a rotting bundle of cash. It was 3 packets of $20 bills, still banded together, badly decayed, nearly $6,000. When the FBI checked the serial numbers, they matched Cooper's ransom exactly. It was the only physical trace of the money ever recovered. And instead of solving the mystery, it deepened it. How did the cash end up there, miles from the expected drop zone? The discovery raised more questions than answers. If Cooper had survived and spent his fortune, why did part of it end up buried in the sand? If he had died on impact, where was the rest of the money, and where was his body? Some argued the bills proved he drowned in the river. Others insisted the money had drifted downstream from a completely different location, meaning he could have landed far from where everyone was searching. Every theory seemed to collapse under the weight of the evidence. Over the decades, the FBI investigated more than 800 suspects. There was a troubled veteran who confessed on his deathbed. There was a man whose surname really was Cooper, and another whose family swore he was the hijacker. Amateur sleuths analyzed the clip-on tie under electron microscopes, finding rare particles of titanium that hinted the suspect might have worked in aerospace or manufacturing. Yet not a single lead ever produced a conclusive match. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially closed the case, unsolved. To this day, no one knows who Dan Cooper really was, or whether he lived or died in that storm. He remains the only person to ever hijack an American commercial airliner and get away with it completely. Did he plummet to his death in the wilderness, his bones scattered somewhere no searcher ever walked? Or did he float safely to Earth, bury a few packets of cash by the river as a decoy, and quietly disappear into an ordinary life? Somewhere out there, the answer may still be waiting, but for now, D.B. Cooper remains a shadow who leapt into the dark and was never found.